Hi, I'm Amanda. I create these videos as a way of sharing and connecting on subjects I love, and also as a way of practicing talking during the stage of life where I don't get to talk to many people. Today, I want to be a part of Witches Black Lent. In week 1, we're supposed to choose one of the 7 deadly sins to work with. And I pretty quickly knew that pride was the one. I feel really fortunate that I've worked with other kinds of systems that work with these pairs that are of so-called good or bad pairs of values or qualities that are kind of meant to train a certain way of thinking, I think. I think the point is to get a person out of that kind of binary thinking. And so I can't help but apply that to this. And looking at the list of 7 deadly sins, it's been really nice to look through them and relate them to different kinds of teachings I've received or experiences I've had. To me, lust and gluttony and sloth, they're all so body-based and related to body needs that when a need is not being met, it emerges as one of these so-called sins or so-called virtues. When I think of gluttony, I think of my disordered eating experiences and a time of life where I was really stressed and had to address this way I was dealing with stress and anxiety in my life. I'm lucky. Binge eating disorder, let's say, I was never diagnosed. But obviously if you're eating out of your trash can, you have a problem. But I'm lucky that didn't become a hazard to my health like other kinds of eating disorders. But it's something that I knew I had to deal with. And I remember talking to my brother once about it and just deciding it's time to talk about that more. And so I did. I told him about, we were at a wedding, and I was sitting and we were talking about, I decided to share about that, yeah, I've had disordered eating. I've eaten out of my trash can. And he had a moment of like repulsion on his face. And I said, please don't look at me that way. A lot of people have this experience and need help. And my cousin's husband overheard, and he was glad to hear it because he had some daughters who were struggling, and he wanted to hear what that was like and what did I do to not do that anymore. I couldn't really be of help. Everyone has such a different experience, and I could just only talk about how, for me, it was first really important not to let shame of what I was doing stop me from recognizing why I was doing it and trying to fix the why. And for me at that time, it meant not beating myself up because I was binge eating due to stress. And then also changing my life to reduce stress. And that wasn't easy, but I digress. That was an important gluttony transforming experience for me. If we see gluttony as really a food-based, eating too much food sin. Sloth, the sin of sloth, I so appreciate because I have been a fast-paced person most of my life. An over-caffeinated, over-performing person. People have joked about how much I love coffee, and in hindsight, I didn't actually drink that much coffee. It just always happened with me. It was like my emotional support aromatherapy, you know? And that was also for, needing to feel stimulated as a way of kind of overperforming when stressed. But I remember it hitting me at one point, kind of like, Why am I so tired? I slept last night. That, oh wait, sleep is not the same thing as rest. Those are different things, and I need sleep and I need rest. And that was a shocking revelation to me. Rest isn't ever easy to make time for or come by. And as I get older, I'm not sleeping better. And that might be because I had a child, and apparently your brain literally changes to be more responsive when you are the primary parent. Like you're just hearing phantom cries all the time. I'm serious. It's amazing. Amazingly difficult, but also amazing in terms of science. Maybe it's also things like hormonal changes that affect the way I sleep. All I know is I can't keep saying I'm tired. It's not new. Okay, I'm tired. It's not my personality. I won't say it all the time like it's my personality. But rest needs to fit into the day better. There's a system, like how do you say that? It's like a self-analysis kind of system called human design that, is worthy of the same criticism we give to a lot of modern occult systems. But I really appreciate it because the label that it assigns to me, according to the date I was born, that I cannot control, is one of the profile it assigns is of one who is highly initiating, has a lot of initiating energy, is like a starter, but not really a finisher, and someone who needs a lot of rest and struggles to get it. That combined with a lot of other kind of details with that kind of profile and type, it offered a language, that system offered a language for me to kind of compare how I know myself to all these different categories. And some I agree with and some I don't. But it was amazing to suddenly have a language and a community of people who are like, hey, we don't feel like others. We need to rest in a way that's different than how other people rest. And that was really validating and interesting. Another sin that I call a body need is like lust. Lust. We cannot help our sexual orientation. We cannot help if we do have or don't have a desire for sex. Okay, we can kind of intellectually work around it or work with it to curate this bodily need that we have, but it's there, and everyone has it in one way or another. And that's like incredibly uncomfortable. It's awful for people to be shamed and controlled by it. It's awful if people feel out of control with their sex drive, their sex needs. It's awful when people have bad ones that hurt others. It's a big subject. And I know it's a big subject. And I think it's really easy to talk about the sin of lust and kind of transform it into a sexually liberating process. I think it's actually too easy to do that. And maybe that's the privilege of a really secular upbringing and a person who had the time to have a positive and to have sexual experiences, some of which were positive and some of which were really, really negative. And I hope that the people who work with this sin can find a way to talk about it in all its complexity. It's also a really triggering subject. All of the sins have that capacity. How have I magically worked with that sin or subject of lust, bodily lust, the way that bodily desire can take us away from a good life, let's say. Maybe that's how Christianity sees the sin of lust. I feel like working as a priestess and a high priestess in a Wiccan system has really transformed my ideas about lust, about the body, and about sexuality. And I think that had a lot to do with the kinds of people I practiced with, who maybe differentiated love and sex, but were really, really positive about the value of sex and love together, and having sex with people we love, and lusting after people we love, and being aware that it can be confusing sometimes. And I feel like some of the rituals that I did in that system really helped work on the nuance and fine lines, working with lust outside of love, without coitus, without intercourse, and recognize it as a really powerful physical power. Powerful because it really activates other people, even if they're not lusting after you or lusting after you. I imagine that this is a big exploration in tantric systems. I think it's at a risk of taking advantage of people too. I don't want to overemphasize or encourage it either, because I think it could be really easy to find it with bad people. I'm really glad I got to work with some really great people. I feel like the transforming the sin of lust has a lot to do with the Gnostic Mass, which is an important ceremony in Lima, in the OTO. Those definitions are hard for me to define sometimes. I'm learning to be a priestess in the Gnostic Mass, and I really find that there's a lot of really powerful, wonderful work with lust in that system, in a way that is not succumbing to it as a sin, and also not repressing it. And it's really cool to be able to transform a negative without repressing it. So I think of lust, gluttony, and sloth as sins based on the needs of the body, right? The need for sexual procreation and pleasure, and those being intertwined things, a need for sustenance, and a need for rest. The others don't quite fit into that category for me. I think of greed, wrath, and envy as being more, and probably also pride, as being emotionally needs. All those sins are sins related to oneself and another person, oneself and others. There's inherent comparison in them to others, and kind of emotional wellness, emotional or mental health needs behind them. I think of wrath and anger. Anger has been a big project of mine personally the last couple of years, and it's been funny to kind of evolve talking about it, because I think that anger is the most powerful emotion, because other people react so badly to it. And I'm saying that way because I feel like people have been reacted badly in the way that I talk about it. And that was really strange, because I don't think we talk about repressing sadness or repressing happiness, but we talk about repressing anger. Everyone experiences anger. I remember the first time I felt rage as an adult, and that seems dumb to say. I remember encountering this feeling at work in a project where I felt like I got set up and let down and blindsided, and I had to step outside to think what is this feeling I'm feeling? Oh, this is rage. That heat, that rising heat, I wasn't familiar with with it enough at that time. And I think my magical training is what allowed me to be to pause, notice it, go somewhere, and then name it, right? Rather than just exploding on the spot. Yeah. And that was something, but that was nothing like the rage I experienced in more recent years, or anger, which I really tie into a couple of different things. But for me, the experience of having a child of extreme sleep deprivation, you can't blame someone for being angry if they're really, really, really tired. They're experiencing sleep deprivation that is comparable to torture. If someone is tortured, okay, they're angry, and repressing it is like not the option. And so when I would try to talk about anger, I realized I was talking about it in a spiritual circle with people who maybe had not had that experience of sleep deprivation and emotionality. They had other kinds of experiences for sure that will have triggered like understandable, extreme, like righteous anger. That's something else. But they couldn't relate to me. And I realized I was with people who's I think they suppressed anger. They suppressed it. They weren't ready. They weren't at peace yet with the power of their own anger. And that's too bad. But that's too bad, because there's something there. And the thing that really revealed it for me, sorry for this stumbly video, people, is starting to work in some Buddhist systems where the emotion of anger is exalted for being like what I interpreted like the easiest emotion, because anger is crystal clear. When you have anger, you know you're angry. It brings crystal clear, diamond clarity, diamond cutting, hard clarity that something is wrong. So when you feel the emotion of anger arise, you can acknowledge it, and then you can look, what is wrong? What am I angry at? Why? And investigate a little bit further to really come to a conclusion of what you can do about it. The emotion of anger is not the same thing as acting angry, as being violent, as yelling, verbal violence, emotional violence, whatever, you know what I mean. Punching a hole in the wall is not the same thing as feeling anger. You can feel and resolve anger and use it as a tool in a way that's a lot more productive than me, slamming my hands on a table, which is an experience I was having. And I'm really grateful to the way that Buddhist teachers brought that to my attention, and the practices I was working with at the time. The thing that really helped for me was a teaching from Lama Lena, from a book called The Flight of the Garuda, which at the center of in the middle of the series, she starts talking about working with the emotions. And she really, the way she talks about emotions and the foundations in that work really were what something drove this aspect of working with emotions, especially anger, right home for me, and it really helped a lot. So much. I'll find a way to share a link with it, and I'm really glad I had it. In Buddhism, wrathful is a term that's like applied to deities, to divine expressions of divine power that might be called deities, and it's like it's an empowered term. Wrathful is not inherently negative. Some people say the word wrathful, some people say fierce, but they're still referring to an important force that like is ultimately in harmony with the universe. And that's a really different way of looking at that word than as a sin, as bad, as to be avoided. Because of that, I didn't want to work with it in this context for Witches Black Lent. I'm already deep in it, somewhere in the process somewhere else, and I'm going to continue with that work. Sorry, I'm shaking the camera as I kind of like start to like get enthusiastic and hit the table. Greed. Accumulating things. Wanting more and never being satisfied with material objects we have. I feel like I worked a lot with greed in one way by paying off an obscene quantity of debt. There was a time in my life when I was about $22,000 in credit card debt, and credit line debt, and like obviously it got to a point where that was not acceptable, and it took a lot of work, a lot of personal like training, mind training, perspective training to pay that off in my own time. It took a lot of being real about my life and what was within my means and what was not. A lot of understanding why I buy things. Why do I buy things? What hole am I filling? To resolve that debt, it took developing a system for myself, because all the advice out there didn't perfectly apply to me. I had to like take it in and integrate it into something that would stick to me, and I did it. It took me 7 years, and I had to get a better job, and I had some needs to fill first to pay off that debt. And I learned that one of the most expensive things in my life, the thing that cost me dearly, was loving someone that didn't love me. That was so costly. And I really learned something about that loving myself might also mean not accumulating all the things, not spending on all the things. Is that really working with greed, with the sin, with the feeling that comes with greed? No, and greed will be one to work with another time. Envy is also on that list of emotional wellness sins. And I don't know what to say about envy, because I looked at it and was kind of like, well, I'm not envious. And that just can't be true. The fact that I said that and had that reaction means it can't be true. That means it is a sin I need to work with. And then when I started poking at that, that veil, right? I start to see things start to emerge and come up. And I think, oh, envy is important to work with, and I am not ready to work with yet, especially not on camera. Not today. Not today, Satan. And I just want to say it out loud for honesty. So whichever ones of you are, whoever out there is working with envy, I will eventually be listening to your videos pretty carefully. So that's all of them, and that leaves me with after 20 minutes of talking, leaves me with pride. Pride. The sin that's considered opposite of humility. I don't know if I like those words as like modern understandings of those of what they mean, because I know for some people working with pride is going to involve unshaming identity, and they're going to transform the sin of pride to find a way to work on their confidence and be proud of themselves. And I love the idea of unshaming everything, because nothing nothing gets better with shaming. The system of the 7 sins, was definitely used as a way of controlling people through shame, by giving them standards, so that people could self-shame each other and control each other and do the work for the greater establishment. But today, I think we know that doesn't work. I don't know. I'm an elder millennial who maybe listens to too much gentle parenting content. Like, I don't want to shame my child. That doesn't work. It didn't work for me. I don't want to shame other people. It doesn't help them. And I shouldn't have to feel shame myself. And yeah, so if that's how someone wants to work with pride, I support them in that. I think there's some really shitty, there's some really awful aspects about pride. And I think I really want to dive into the experience of them at their worst level as a way of really working with this sin. And in some ways, as a person who doesn't have much power right now, much influence on many people, pride is maybe safer to work with than some of the other sins. Maybe not. I think words for pride that embody what I think it means would include like psychopathy and corporate psychopathy, narcissism, cognitive dissonance, and hypocrisy and double standards, entitlement, superiority, things that really where we separate ourselves from others and really put ourselves above them and better than them, so we don't need to consider or care about them. In that way, working with pride for self-confidence can be a bit of a trap, or can be on the threshold of the trap, or can be kind of exactly why pride is apparently considered the parent of the sins, right? Because the entitlement creep can be slow and gradual, and maybe we don't even notice it. I think that pride can emerge from pride, the sin pride, bad pride, like entitlement can kind of emerge when maybe when we have feelings about lack of agency or control or power, struggles with power in our own life and who has power over us, and kind of the subtle understandings we have when we're with someone and they're trying to control us in an obvious or in a not obvious way. I'll work on developing the language of this better as I do Witches Black Lent and do the exercises that I have in mind and the practices I have in mind. But I would love for other people who speak better than I do to develop on this. I would love to hear what you think. I know I will pause and go through the stages of my life and moments where I felt better than others. And I think that will contribute a lot to this exploration in Witches Black Lent. I do think that there are moments where I have been better than others and smarter than others and did something better than others. While I have struggles with confidence, sometimes that's not my usual modus operandi. And while I'm allowed to have that opinion, and I certainly have the right to know what's better or right for me, I don't always have the right to say what's right for other people, right? Other people are allowed to choose things that I think are wrong. Other people are allowed to hold opinions I think are wrong. People are allowed to choose bad things for themselves, things that I think are bad or wrong or harmful or hurtful or dangerous. Autonomous individuals Adults, people can do things for themselves. And if I'm not in a position of responsibility that I have consented to, then I am not responsible for that. And taking on that responsibility, feeling like I have to help someone, is also prideful. Compulsive helping, it might be also prideful. The virtue of pride apparently is the virtue counterpart to the sin of pride is apparently humility. But like, it's not hard to weaponize humility. It's not hard to weaponize any of the virtues. So I'm not down for that word as a virtue either. If I follow the maxim that the opposite of hate isn't love, it's indifference, then the opposite of the sin of pride isn't humility. Words I come up with are things like acknowledgement, acknowledging in the positives and negatives in ourselves, but also in others, acknowledging, exalting others, celebrating others. We can't be, can we be sinfully prideful when we all celebrate each other and commiserate with each other and support one another? Maybe the opposite of, maybe the counterpart or the balancer of pride is spaciousness or responsiveness. Like in the way that we can be so much harder on ourselves than we are on others. I'm going to keep working on this too and see what emerges in my pride work. In contemplating pride, something that came to mind for me was the book Animal Farm by George Orwell, where like the farm overthrows the farmer, and that way the animals can like live the life of luxury that the farmers do, but over time the pigs start to take control, and the pigs dominate, and the pigs change the rules, and they fix the rules, and they change them to all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. And I really appreciate Animal Farm as something that keeps coming back to me. It's a very short book and easy to read if you want. It's just always applicable. It always is. And it's an allegorical text that's easier to read than Dante's Inferno, which I am also reading. And I find them, in terms of pride, to be really fascinating because of that way that supposedly pride leads you to the other sins. And the idea that pride as a sin in Dante's Inferno is not actually a hell. It's apparently one of the purgatories. I don't know. I'm not there yet in the reading. While I read, I'm also listening to kind of analyses by literary people who are better at that than I am, and that's really helping me kind of work my way through it. Pride. I feel like pride can be the difference between a manager and a leader. One is controlling, one sets an example. I think that pride as a remediated quality is a tool that we can use, because everyone has a sense of individuality. Everyone has a self. Some people call this the ego and emphasize ego death, but different people have different opinions, right? Our sense of self, the part of us that is expressed in maybe Kabbalistic language of "I am that I am," or I think therefore I am in philosophy. It doesn't die. It just changes or puts on new clothes or evolves over time. So I've had teachers talk about the analogy of changing your clothes. Sometimes your personality clothes, the ones that you used to have, they don't fit you anymore, and they're getting in your way and they're harming you. We have to, so as we evolve, we need to keep a realistic, or have a new look at ourselves sometimes. And I think that's really a valuable way of working with pride as well. And I don't mean to be overly love and light about it, because the love and light thing that everyone criticizes is about repressing negatives, which is not what I'm talking about. With wallowing in the negatives and persevering is extremely difficult. And that is the work of transforming poisons or transforming negatives. Transforming poisons being the language that comes out of Buddhist systems. That is really something I'm appreciating right now. And I think that working with the sin of pride and working on the individuality as a tool, as a way we connect to each other, it can be really powerful. That's all I really wanted to say today about why I chose pride. And it's like, and all the things that come up when I think about it. You know, on a last note, actually, in the Wiccan tradition that I was initiated into, it was advised that pride is the worst quality in a candidate, the very worst quality in a candidate, because a person who's with the negative pride will struggle to be responsive. They will struggle to listen. They will struggle to hear the needs of others and be flexible and adapt. I think we see the power of negative pride everywhere in our politics right now, incredibly. And there's a lot of value about working with pride, the sin of pride as a skill, as a range, as a magical ability. That statement was in my kind of initiate candidate criteria commentary is really interesting, because I left the group that I was initiated into because I found my high priest was becoming too much of a hypocrite. He was being proud. He wasn't doing the work of self-balancing and self-challenging anymore. And I think I'm my teacher student, and I still think that there's things that that we have in common, and that might just be a human thing too. And I often wonder now if that line there isn't about the candidate, it's about the initiator, and a way of using othering as a magical process. It was brought to my attention that the kind of projections we put on others, projecting onto others and it changing them, is called the Pygmalion effect. And that the Pygmalion effect, as a magical power intentionally used, can really be something. That's a really big subject to just lob on there at the end of a long video. That's all that to say. That's also on the explorations I want to have with pride. And I'm kind of putting all this out there so that I can kind of share these ideas with the other people who are participating in Witches Black Lent, to collaborate with them, and with the hope that they can bounce back ideas and thoughts that I can really, that my brain will on its own just naturally expand into and within and without. And I'm losing my words. So it's time to finish up. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And I hope to continue to make a few more videos about this in the coming weeks.